as well, recording this computer. And good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. And it is Friday, the 18th of December. Tools for Living Your Life, episode 15. It almost feels like Star Wars, like that whole Star Wars thing about episode, I don't know what number they're on. And good evening to you, Sarah, our lovely special guest, following on from Tony last week. So how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good, and I'm so thrilled to be on this, and thank you for asking me.
Thank you for accepting.
This is such a lovely way, actually, for me to end my term, because today was my last day of term.
Whoop, whoop.
How did it go?
Good, good, good. I'm all ready to put my out of office on.
Fabulous. Fabulous. And you kind of got the memo about Christmas jumpers. Voila. Let's see yours, Sarah. Look at that.
Want to see mine?
Stephen, good sir, can we see yours?
Excellent.
Wonderful, wonderful. That is.
It even looks like I've spilt soup down it. I haven't. But it looks
That is
like
an amazing Christmas jumper. It is fabulous. Right, I'm just making sure that yeah, so we are live, and so wonderful Christmas jumper, Steve. Thanks for thanks.
As Sarah just told me, Christmas happens on the inside, not the out.
Yeah.
So inside, I'm all decked with holly and ivy and antlers.
Jingle bells.
Oh, jingle bells. Oh.
All of that good Christmassy stuff.
Darned right. Hey, listen, do you want a Christmas joke before we
Go
start?
for it. Go for it.
Because I'm taking part in a Christmas quiz on Sunday, so I'm going to practice one of my jokes on you. Let's see, which one should we go for? Oh, this is good. What has a huge nose, grey skin, and wears glass slippers?
So what's huge? Say that again. Sorry, Steve.
What has a huge nose, grey skin, and wears glass slippers?
No idea.
No idea.
Cinderelephant.
Yay! I love it.
For it, Jaff.
I love it.
Don't be doing all this.
Yeah.
I love them. I love them. They're like the best dad jokes ever.
Okay, well, there you go.
That's cracker jokes and dad jokes mixed in one Christmassy package.
Cracker jokes is going to be my round.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I think what you're absolutely so much better at, Steve, is taking us through our starter activity. So if I hand up, see how seamless that was. See how seamless that was. It was almost as though we'd practiced this yesterday evening.
Okay.
So that means you do something, Steve.
If you're going to be like that, then fine. Should we do a 1 minute workout?
Oh yes, let's do it.
Cool. So this is to exercise every muscle in your body, just very quickly, and that gives us that boost of endorphins and serotonin. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Sounds right.
Sarah knows. Yep. She knows these things. So you can do this standing up if you want to. I'm going to do it sitting down. Just so
I'll do it standing up.
I'll do it sitting.
So what we're going to do is just start at our toes. What does that say? Naughty list.
Naughty list. You should be glad you're not on it, Steve. You should be really, really glad you're not on it.
Moving on. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Just starting at your toes, what I want you to do is clench them and hold the tension in them, and then let the tension go through your feet, up into your ankles and up into your calves, and then into your knees, and then into your thighs, and your bum. And then hold that tension. So everything now below your waist should be really tense. And notice what happens now when you double that tension. Okay? So really, really tense. Okay, and now let the tension spread up the front of your body into your stomach and your chest. And up the back of your body, into your rib cage and all those muscles around your ribs. Right up to your shoulders. And then start letting that tension just spread down your arms, into your biceps and your elbows, into your forearms, into your wrists, and then finally clench your fists. Okay, so now everything below your neck is really tense. Okay, and do you remember what we did when we just kind of doubled that tension before? Let's do that again now. Go for it. Double that tension. Okay, so now what I want to see now is just big, big, big smiles. So I need to see teeth. That's brilliant, Sarah. Well done. Yeah, good. And what I want you to do, either out loud or in your head, is start saying yes. So out loud if you want to, in your head if you want to, but as you're doing it, what I want you to do with that big smile still on your face is have a look at the patch of ceiling just above your head as you're going, yes, 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 yes. So now louder and louder and quicker, louder, quicker, louder, quicker, louder and quicker, and relax. And just let the endorphins and the serotonins do their work while Jaff tells us a story.
Oh, that was really interesting, Steve. Thank you so much for that.
You said that uncertainly.
Say that again.
That was a bit uncertain.
No, it was. It was. I was just mindful. I was just mindful that I live with 8 other people in this house, and they don't necessarily understand what I do some of the time. So for me, shouting yes at the top of my lungs might just be a step too far for them. Repeatedly might be a step too far. And at any moment now, Mum could walk through that door and be like, "What on earth is going on, Santa Claus?"
Well, look at it this way, Jaff. When I used to do this regularly with when I worked in pupil referral units, like where Sarah manages now, there was one group who were really grumpy to start with. And after they'd done it a couple of times, they wouldn't start a lesson until we've done the orgasm game. Just saying, that's what they called
fabulous,
it.
Well,
fabulous.
Hey, it worked.
So good afternoon, Tony. You've just joined us whilst Steve is I have no idea what Steve's talking about right now. and one of the things Tony said is that Jaffer is, I love this, Jaffer is chief elf. See, I always wanted a role like that. I think I'd make a really good chief elf.
I think you would, Jaff.
Thank you.
I
think that'd be awesome. Anyway, the story, and it links nicely to the story, which is I'm me and I'm okay. So just get yourselves nice and comfortable and just perhaps sit in any position that's right for you. And you might want to listen to the story with your eyes open, or likewise, you can listen to it with your eyes closed. And this is I Am Me and I'm Okay by Virginia Satir. I am me. In all the world, there is no one else exactly like me. Everything that comes out of me is authentically mine because I alone chose it. I own everything about me, my body, my feelings, my mouth, my voice, all my actions, whether they be to others or to myself. I own my fantasies, my dreams, my hopes, my fears. I own my triumphs and successes, all my failures and mistakes. Because I own all of me, I can become intimately acquainted with me. By doing so, I can love me and be friendly with all my parts. I know that there are aspects of myself that still puzzle me, and other aspects that I do not know. But as long as I am friendly and loving to myself, I can courageously and hopefully look for solutions to the puzzles and ways to find out more about me. However I look and sound, whatever I say and do, and whatever I think and feel at a given moment is authentically me. If later, some parts of how I looked or sounded or thought or felt turned out to be unfitting, well, I can discard that which was unfitting and still keep the rest. And invent something new for that which I discarded. I can see, hear, feel, think, say, and do. I have tools to survive, to be close to others, to be productive, and to make sense and order out of the world of people and things outside me. I own me, and therefore I can engineer me. I am me, and I am okay. So there we are. What a lovely story to finish our year of podcasts. I am me and I'm okay. Oh,
by
have you
her. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Well, you're starting to freeze on my side, and
Jeff,
it seems as though
you're frozen up
technology
on
isn't.
my screen.
So what I'm
Sarah,
just going to
welcome to our
do is
world.
I'm going to.
This is
Let's keep talking. Now, I
I
don't
was
know if
gonna
Jeff can
say.
see this, but I've been wrapping up Christmas presents today, and this is one I haven't wrapped up. That would just be great for.
I was just thinking, yeah, that would be for his chief elf role.
Yeah. Because David Sedaris was the chief elf. It's very
Sounds
dry.
cool.
I like it.
I like that.
Anyway,
I did wonder when Jeff froze, I was kind of like, he's asked to be the chief elf and now he's frozen. Like, is there some Christmas magic going on?
There probably is. Shall we just keep chatting?
We can,
Steve.
Yeah. Where do you want to go with the chat?
Well, you were going to talk to us, I think, about how you, well, first of all, your NLP journey, but also about how you use NLP as a school leader.
Yeah, which is all of the time in the shortest answer. It's kind of woven now through kind of everything that I do as a leader. But in terms of my journey, NLP is really one of those things in life that was quite serendipitous, and it kept appearing in my life, which was interesting. So the first time I came across NLP, it was as a sports person. So I know you know this, Steve, but I used to do judo for Great Britain. And at the time that I was becoming a senior player and really sort of stepping up into that level of sport. And we got access to various kind of sports psychology taster things. Now, one of the people that worked with us for a while was an NLP practitioner. And it was very different to the other sports psychology, and I loved it. It was the biggest thing that had the impact for me as a sports performer. So that kind of was that, and I carried on for a few years. And when I came out of sport and went into education, which is what I'm a leader in now, I got selected to apply for a fast-track national programme, so a national leadership development programme. Went through the various recruitment stages, and that was run by the National College of Leadership. It had attached to it the most amazing CPD. That was the biggest bonus of being on it. And you got a brochure of CPD that you could select from. So I was flipping through. And one was NLP for leaders, school leaders. And it was by it was Henry Lydiard and Roger Terry who were running it. So I thought, oh, NLP, I really liked that. You know, that was brilliant when I did judo. So I signed up for that. Interestingly, it was in Chichester. And my head teacher at the time, who taught me lots of things about headship, but one was about the importance of getting people, and she got my kind of quirks and things. And she said, Sarah, do you know where Chichester is? I said, of course I do, it's near Chester. Learning point, it's not near Chester. It was a very, very long train drive. But it was entirely worth it, I have to say. And we did it in 3.5 days. They shortened it, but we essentially did the diploma. And that was the first time I got a foundation diploma in NLP, and loved it again. Absolutely just was a good fit. Came out of that, carried on, and then hit some personal life stuff that I struggled with, and was given a chance to go to a counsellor. And this isn't against counselling, because I think for some people it works brilliantly, and there's something about the right counsellor, the right person. But for me, that counselling session didn't help. It actually made it a little bit more difficult for me. And so I thought back and thought about the NLP, and I actually contacted Henry Lydiard at the time and asked her if she knew of anybody that I could see. And she recommended someone in Leeds, and I travelled up to Leeds for a session, and it helped massively again. So it just kind of, it was like this thread through my life that just kept appearing. And then you came and did a CPD at school that I was in at the time. And at the time I was an assistant head in a school that was in special measures, was going through Ofsted processes, was also going through a merger with another local school that was particularly sort of, you know, tricky. And we were going through academisation at the same time, you know. So, and an easy mix of stuff to manage.
That was one of the hardest training gigs I've ever done. Because
Yeah,
I think it was around Christmas, the New Year, and the staff were just the morale. You could cut it with a knife. It was really tough.
Yeah, it was. And I think anybody, if I remember, you'd not got the full context either, had you? And I think for anybody to come in and do a training session in that environment, I mean, wowzers. It was a tough time.
It sticks in my mind.
Yeah, I can imagine. She had the staff from those two schools that hadn't gelled at all at that point. And and restructure, of course, was a massive part of that. And academic, so yeah, it was a time for growth and development with that. But what you did, which was I'm always so grateful for, is it was kind of almost like that ping in my mind again, because you were doing NLP, and it was like, this keeps cropping up. And I was struggling at the time, and in the run up to that, I'm quite open. I'd had burnout and depression for lots of reasons in my first assistant headship role. And because I think the sporting nature of me, part of me was realizing that some of that was outside stuff that was a pressure, but I was curious about what it was about me that had allowed that to happen, and kind of not in a blame way, but I was really determined that it wouldn't happen again. Like in a judo match, you can get caught by someone, but you don't want to be making that same mistake twice. So when you came along, it was like almost a little bit of throwing a lifeline. And I remember talking to you at the end and asking you about training, and you put me in touch with Chris Grimsley, who is NLP in the Northwest. And I rang Chris up and haven't looked back. And I redid the foundation diploma with Chris and did all of it all the way through mastery. But yeah, NLP for me, I love it because I'm one of those people who has to be convinced by it myself.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, so it worked brilliantly for me. And not only did it work where other stuff had not worked so well. So yeah, that's how I did it. And I've been using it ever since.
It's funny, isn't it, as well, you know, how kind of like we sort of stories cross and overlap and things like that. Because I'd forgotten that you started training with Henry Lydiard, because when I did my Train the Trainers course, she was the lead trainer on it, and she's wonderful. She's really good. Yeah. But it's nice that the way that kind of things keep cropping up, and I think there's people sometimes talk about the NLP family, and I sometimes get a bit kind of cautious about that, because family's not always very comfortable places to be, but they're also places that kind of give us room to grow and kind of explore ideas, and on a good day anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think I'm always grateful for the fortune that I had in meeting and coming across trainers of NLP and folk that are doing NLP that do it in a very, very ethical and ecological way, and with that intention of, you know, I'm okay, you're okay, none of us need rescuing. And I'm doing it for in service rather than for, you know, power or whatever, which is aligned with my leadership vision as well, if you like. So yeah, very, very fortunate to have met not only ethical people, but great trainers and great NLP folk.
So let me ask you, because are you acting head?
Yeah,
Is that how I should describe you?
Well, it's interesting, and that in itself provides a challenge for me. So the current role that I'm in, I've always worked in secondary schools, which is where you did your famous training session, and in quite challenging secondary schools in difficult situations sometimes, and that's always been my background. So all of my teaching and all of my leadership. So I've been assistant head in several schools in mainstream. And then made a decision with some of the government agenda around education and some of the way education was going, that I wasn't getting to do the inclusion stuff that I'd started out doing in my profession. And I was kind of, if I'm honest, I was falling out of love with the job. Right. And I could sense that. And so I kind of had a look at that and did the very NLP thing of, if this is how it is, what do I want and what do I need to do to actually make that happen? So I made the decision to look at alternative provision. And at that point, again, really, in the way these things often happen, an advert came up for where I am now. And so I went and looked round and was really up for doing that. So yes, I moved across and my job was deputy head. So that's what I am and that's what I got. And then in my second year of being deputy head, our head, who's a fantastic head, got seconded to another PRU, another PRU in the area, and was asked to do the headship. Now, originally that was for a term, so it started off as a very short-term thing. So I stepped up for half the week as acting head for a term. And because that worked so successfully, they asked him to stay on in the same capacity and oversee both schools. So I am both deputy head and acting head for part of the time. And for the last few weeks, I've been acting head for all of that chunk of time because he's been seconded to the other school and all the COVID bubble stuff. Yeah. So that's that brings its own challenges because that's a kind of hybrid role. There's a little bit of a dance to be done.
Yeah, I'm sure. So how do you use your NLP in that role?
I use my NLP, and I know I said this at the start because it does become something that you weave in all the time, doesn't it? And I always think my baseline, and this is where NLP and leadership are so beautifully aligned for me, is leadership is about how do you show up fully and humanly, but in the best state and the most resourceful state that you can be. And I think the biggest way, I mean, I use it in lots of ways, but I think the biggest way, the golden thread of this last pandemic of how has NLP helped me as a leader, and how does it help me manage that hybrid role, is it's about how do I, even when it's challenging, stay in the most resourceful state. Because how your state is as a leader is probably the most influential thing, I think, on everyone around you. So yeah, that's how I've used it. And the other thing I would say, just linking in with Jaffer's story, because I do love that, the Virginia satire. And I remember the first time I came across it, the light bulb part of it for me was the bit about, those things that perhaps I didn't do as well as I would have liked. The times I didn't respond as well as I would like. How can I be okay with that? How can I kind of gently discard that and take the learning from it and create something different next time? And, I think I'm very like you, Steve. I know we've had lots of conversations about NLP and applied NLP. And applied NLP for me is applying it in the very messy human world. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't fix everything. I do not float around. I practice NLP. I love NLP. I still don't float around on some Zen-like pink candy floss cloud, having it all sorted and everything's okay. And I just need to think this, I can just think this situation better. I mess up still, royally. I don't always have the most calm state all of the time. But I think what NLP has given me is I don't get stuck there for as long.
Yeah, that kind of really strikes a chord with me as well, that whole thing about, that pink fluffy cloud stuff. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that about? Let's be human about it.
Yeah. And I think, there's an honesty about it by kind of saying, well, do you know what? We're in a world where stuff happens. And a friend of mine went on a training course. I don't think it was an NLP one, but he came back with this mantra in his head that he keeps going on about. And he keeps saying, well, it's not the facts, it's how you react. And I think, that's where NLP helps me, because stuff happens. It's out of my control.
Yeah.
So I do quite a bit of work now with homeless and vulnerable young people in Blackpool.
Yeah.
With street life, and sometimes you're kind of faced with such horrendous stories from these young people that I feel a real urge to kind of rescue and say it's going to be all right, and there's no need to be angry. And actually what I've trained myself to do is when people come into me and they say, well, I need anger management, tell us the situation.
Yeah,
Actually,
absolutely.
Anger's okay. It's a reasonable reaction to the situation you're in, but if you stay there, then all that happens is you're going to get more and more angry and less resourceful. So there's something about acknowledging the fact that we're in a world where bad stuff happens and kind of exploring how we deal with it.
I think you're right, and I think, you know, like, there's some parallels, isn't there, with our settings? I know you've worked in previously. Now you're working with young people in a different setting, but still facing incredible challenge and real, you know, that isn't something you can just manifest yourself out of, but how you do respond and where you've got choice. I have a big thing about the students that I work with is, I think part of my why I do what I do is I want to give them choices. I want to be able to give them choices about different things, about how they react in the moment, but also how they do stuff in life. But there's something interesting, isn't there, about our states? You know, I said as a leader we manage states. Anger management is a kind of state thing, but that's something that I've learned from NLP, because I think previously I used to almost be a bit binary, and there's good emotions and there's bad emotions, and you don't whatever you can do to stay away from the bad emotions, and actually that isn't healthy in itself, because we are, you know, we're meant to experience the full spectrum of emotions, and as you say, it's just about not staying there. But actually I think we can make ourselves I know certainly, and I talked about burnout and depression, and I'm open about the way that I struggled with that for a period of time. Some of how I got there was because my response to what I would think of as those bad emotions was to almost try and outrun them, or outwork them. You know, if I'm so busy, I haven't got, and actually that is not helpful. That's not helpful. It's helpful in the short term, but it's not sustainable.
So that idea that you can work your way out of stress, or I don't know, worry your way out of worry. If I worry hard enough, the thing that I'm worrying about will go away.
Absolutely. And if it's not working, I'll do it more and I'll do it harder. That'll do it.
I found myself doing that actually the other week. It was around about the time of, it was just before the US elections. And to be honest, I'm not a fan of Mr. Trump. I never have been. And the thought of another 4 years of him screwing up not only his own country, but, you know, possibly the world as well in different ways, just it filled me with anxiety. And you know, that whole thing about if I worry hard enough, then I will have some influence over this election. And my partner, Catherine, who you know, and you trained with Kath, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, fabulous.
Like, do you know what, Steve? You just need to give your head a wobble. You know enough stuff not to fall into these traps. So what's going on? And it was dead interesting, because, you know, I've been working with NLP and using NLP for I can't remember how many years now, but it's over a decade. And this is page 101.
Exactly.
Like,
but we do it because we're humans, Steve, and I think we need either somebody to say to us, give your head a wobble, or at some point we don't stay there for long enough and we can sort of say that to ourselves. But you're so right, you know, and it is that very human, messy stuff, isn't it? We are messy humans.
Have you ever come across a guy called Martin Seligman, the positive psychology guru?
I opened my resilience drawer in my weird brain, and that was there.
So you know that sometimes people do that quiz thing about, well, who would you invite around for three people from history? Who would you invite around? I think Martin Seligman will be pretty near the top of my list. So he was a clinical psychologist, I think, in the States, and successful. He was the president of the American Psychological Association. And then he woke up one morning and thought, only been doing half a job all my career, because what psychology typically focuses on is dysfunction, panic attacks, depression, and actually what he said was, well, in a world where lots of bad things happen, how come we're not all like just completely depressed and dysfunctional all the time? So his question then was, well, okay, well, despite what's going on around us, how do we work? So he devoted he's still working, he's devoted the second half of his career to what he started to call positive psychology, and the idea that that whole thing about, well, if stuff is happening that isn't great and we have no control of it, then how can we still function so well? But one of the things that he talks about, and that has really stuck in my head, and I might have mentioned them before on these chats, but it's the 3 Ps. So when people get stuck in a state, often it's because they're responding to the 3 Ps, and the first P is it permanent? And I don't know about you, but sometimes I just I can't see a way out of stuff.
It feels there, doesn't it?
Yeah. So is it permanent? Is it personal is the second P. So if Trump is ranting about whatever he's ranting about, how come you've made it personal to Steve in Blackpool? And the third P is about it being pervasive. In other words, it doesn't just affect one part of your life, but it affects other parts as well. So as well as feeling anxious about the US elections, it was waking me up at weird hours of the night. So I it kind of invaded my sleep and my private life as well. And I just needed to with using those 3 Ps, it just helped me get a bit of perspective on it, which I suppose is the 4th P, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the key, isn't it? How do you get perspective at times? And I love that notion. And it puts me in mind of a couple of things. It puts me in mind of that notion of where are you shining your torch being, which is what we talk about a lot, isn't it? And sort of being able to just nudge it slightly. And that whole thing about the frame, or almost like, I always have an image of putting glasses on, but like, what lens are you looking through? What frame, what meaning are we attaching to stuff as well? Because us humans, we can attach meaning to stuff at the drop of a hat, can't we?
Oh yeah.
And then we stick with that, and sometimes just questioning that, like, what meaning am I putting to that? I've just done it now. I've not long ago, when I said I put the out of office on, I had an email, and I put meaning to it and got myself annoyed about something, and actually sort of questioning now, well, that meaning is something I've put to it, and just being able to step back. And I think when you said, going back to how has NLP helped you, I think that perspective is huge, and being able to step back and be flexible. I talked about being human. There was not long ago, we've had one of the hardest things about the recent stuff is getting new starters in, and we're in bubbles, so you don't get that contact in the same way. Also, interestingly, wearing face masks, so that sort of non-verbal stuff is partially there, but it's affected. And we were all waiting, so our students get picked up in taxis, and it's on the yard, and I was waiting with a group of students, and it was a new starter, a new lad who'd not been with us very long at all. I had said hello to him and introduced myself, but he met a lot of people, to be fair to the lad, and not seen me for a couple of days. And I've got my face mask on and my coat on and everything else. And a staff member challenged him about something, and we didn't get the response we were hoping for. And I sort of had overheard it, because sort of the onus was on to sort of intervene. And I started doing that, thinking, I know that it was tiredness, overload of stuff to deal with, end of term of what has been a pandemic filled tough tough time. So my response was not tippity top. You know, like I wouldn't put it as my best piece of interaction with a young person, despite knowing everything I know. And I had that, you know, that inner voice in your head. How dare you? And I started speaking to him in that tone, and that leaked out massively, that very critical tone. And of course, I didn't get the best response, which is no surprise. So my inner voice was going, how very dare that did that. And I started, and then it was going south, this interaction. I suddenly thought, give your head a wobble. What are you playing at? You know better than this. You know, and I stopped mid interaction and just kind of said, I'm not being fair here, am I? And he looked at me and went, no, which was entirely accurate. And I said, I don't expect you to remember who I am. It's been the end of the day. You've got some woman giving you this. So I said, let's just start this again. Reintroduce myself, explain what we needed, but being able to say to him, I'm not being fair, and get that agreement. And it was very human, and we had a better interaction. But it's that ability, I think, to recognize and step back.
And it's the ability, but there's also, in that situation you've just described, the thing that kind of stands out for me is the word courage, actually, because especially as a head teacher, in front of a kid who's maybe giving you some behaviour, to actually have the courage to say, hang on, I'm part of the problem. Let's start again. And I can imagine how that young person would respond to that kind of openness, and to say, hey, I'm a human being as well, right? So let's do this again.
Exactly. It broke that pattern, and there's something for me massive. And you're right. And I think some of what was leaking out was pressure on my part, because you're on a yard, you've got that student, you've also got other students, but you've also got your staff. You know, you've also got your staff. And I think one of my big things about leadership is about vulnerable, courageous leadership, and showing up fully, and modeling, you know, and that's for
what you want to see.
Exactly. For both, you know, your team and students. And, you know, because you've worked with young people for a long time, that notion in the past that you would just have automatic respect because of being a teacher or being, you know, a leader, or like that has, you know, I've been in this game for 20 odd years. I'm not even sure it was there at the start. If there was a glimmer of it left at the start, there's certainly not now. Young people work differently, and I don't disagree with that, actually. So, you know, if I want respect and courage and the ability to hold our hands up and say, actually, do you know what, I'm getting this wrong, then that has to start with me. You know, that has to start there. So
There's another little phrase that I use to kind of get perspective in situations like that. And it was when I was part of the team that helped set up the pupil referral units in Blackpool, and this is going back to 1999. So it was last century.
The 90s.
And I was thinking, well, I never worked in a school at that time, not since I'd left school. So I wasn't quite sure how that was going to work, except that we were going to be working with some, you know, quite challenging young people. And we were given some wonderful training by a guy called Bill Rogers. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I have. I did. I remember that era very well. Yes.
Well, he's an Australian. I think he's Australian, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah, he was.
And he came and he did some fantastic inset training across Blackpool. So I can remember I think it was in the Imperial Hotel, and it was in the ballroom, and there was he, and he just a wonderful trainer. And one of the things that I remember was that his idea of technology was an overhead projector, and he used to draw his slides as he was kind of telling his message. It was brilliant, absolutely wonderful. And so he kind of talked us through all kinds of behavioral management techniques. He was dead practical. It was brilliant. It was just what I needed. And I sat there kind of soaking it all up. It was really, I was so excited by it, because I was like, this is how we do our stuff. And it's just really good to hear you say this. But at the end of each of these techniques, one of the things that I remember, he would always say, and bad day notwithstanding. And I was like,
Right.
oh, what's that mean? And we go about and think about it, and he's saying, it's okay, because you're human.
Yeah.
So you're going to have bad days, and sometimes this stuff ain't going to work, and
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to feel overwhelmed, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So welcome, it's
Absolutely.
like, welcome to the human race.
Yeah.
And that do you know, those few words, of all the stuff that he said, which was so wise and so humane, and just a lovely way of working with other people. That phrase, bad day notwithstanding, is the bit that really sticks in my mind.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. Absolutely.
I've had a few bad days since then.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I remember him at the time, because the 90s, you're right, and he was big in Blackpool,
Yeah.
Bill Rogers stuff, and I was a really, really young professional, so that was kind of my foundation of behaviour management, which was brilliant, and all of that stuff about partial agreement.
Yeah.
Partially agree and then move them on. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just brilliant stuff. But I didn't know he did that, and I love that. And again, aligning with that leadership stuff about courageous human leadership.
Yeah.
As leaders, it starts with us, and us being able to say for ourselves, bad day notwithstanding, and for our team, because especially in roles like this, you know, you show up every day, you're dealing, you know, from the minute you come in to the minute you leave, there's a whole host of different challenges thrown your way. And again, in terms of an approach, there's something about resiliency work that I do with people, with leaders, and we can as humans focus on the stuff we get wrong. So you can have a day, you know, I can think of a day in the work that I do, and you're faced with decision after decision after decision, interaction after interaction, problem to solve, and you can get most of that right. And again, one of the things I used to do was, if I'd got one of those things wrong, I'd absolutely focus on that, you know, I'd be pulling away at that. And actually there is something really human in saying, you know, I had a bad day notwithstanding, or bad moment notwithstanding.
Absolutely.
You know. But yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. So yeah, I learned a lot from him. I for those of you who might be listening to this, you know, I'm a bit of a book geek, and I can remember the book that he wrote on around that time that was the basis of all this. I think it was called You Know the Fair Rule. I think it's still in print, and it's a lovely read, because it's full of his own personal anecdotes of working in the Australian equivalent of pupil referral unit. And so I'm imagining that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. He knew his stuff, didn't he? It was rooted in lived experience, and I kind absolutely. I love that credibility as well, and that, you know, thinking of that human stuff. When I did my judo training, I started at the start, for anyone who's joining late, saying that my background was in sort of high level sport and doing judo. And I used to train at a brilliant club, Bay Cup Judo Club, absolutely fantastic coach, brilliant judo players there to train with. But we used to train there, and at Kendal as well, there was a sign, and it was that whole far better it is to dare mighty things and fail kind of quote than to take rank amongst those poor timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. And as a young player, I used to struggle with that. Sort of like, we're here to win. We're having none of that stuff. And it took some time to kind of understand that, and that whole thing of actually, you know, if you're going to do stuff. One of the things I loved about judo in terms of courage development is it's very visible. You know, there's nowhere to hide. Two people walk on a mat in a competition. One of you walks off winning, and one of you walks off losing, and there is no in between. And you know, you can get caught by an amazing throw and it's quite spectacular, or the other way around, and that's the beauty of it. You know, that's the beauty of it. But I think what it did for me certainly is it makes you used to that visible stuff. You'll have moments of absolute sublime glory, and you'll have moments where it just all unravels quickly, and it's very visible. And how you deal with that, I think is really interesting. But where I'm going with that is the credibility that Bill had was because he'd done it. And one of the things Brené Brown talks a lot about, you know, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked as well, don't be giving advice. And there's something again for me about, I know one of my things about doing the leadership coaching that I do is I really love, you know, I'm really passionate about the fact that I do that coaching very much rooted in the reality of it, the reality of actually making those mistakes and the messy side of that, and how you navigate that, rather than that. I can't tell you the amount of tournaments I would have won when I was injured, sat on the sidelines. I'd have won every match. You know, it's one of them, isn't it? So if you're down here doing it, you know, all well and good.
Yeah.
But
that gives you, you got to have skin in the game.
That's it. I like that. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always quite intrigued about how NLP as I guess it kind of in some ways grew out of the sports coaching, or overlapped at least with it. So the idea that elite athletes do a lot of training in their heads as well as the physical stuff. And I suppose in a way it kind of it's to me it's almost like, well, it's stating the bleeding obvious, you know, because if your mind and your body are part of the same system and you're only training your body, then how does your mind get to catch up? But I just love the way that it kind of becomes visible, and it has been for a while, I suppose, when you know what you're looking for. So do you remember Johnny Wilkinson, when the rugby player?
Yes, yeah.
And when he was going up to kick the kind of do the conversions and the penalty kicks for the England rugby team, and he went through all this stuff when he was kind of like talking to this bird in his hand, and he stuck his bum out, which Catherine, for some reason, still loves.
I can only imagine what.
But he went through all this routine, and he kept landing his kicks time and time again. And he was just so metronomic that he kind of, you know, went to the top of his. But all that was what we saw was a physical manifestation in a way of his mental preparation for taking that kick. So the whole thing was purposeful. It was repeatable. It became a habit, a routine. It became part of his programming in order to excel at what he did.
Absolutely.
And I just really think, well, I wonder how we can use that in just the stuff that we do. I don't know if you have any ideas. I'm putting you right on the spot.
No,
here, so
it's fine. That's fine. No, because it's something I noodle with a lot, because my background is sports, and that whole how do you transition? I mean, there's a really interesting piece of work being done at the moment about transition of elite athletes once their career is over and things like that, because it's how do you transfer some of that stuff that you've learned in sport. And for me, it comes back to that real notion that is an NLP notion that all performance is state related. And the performance might be sport, and like you say, that's quite often where we see it. It's very visible. Whether somebody, you know, gets the penalty or not in football is less about their technical ability and much more about their state. So how do you not just, I guess there's something around performances, all performances is state related. So you've got to be in the right state. And that's that whole thing about being in the most resourceful state. And then what's interesting for me in the parallel between sport and leadership is all performances state related. But for those big games, those big moments in your career, the time you most need to be able to do your state management is the time when there's the most pressure and most challenge. You know, so how do you access that state under the most challenging situations? And as you say, there's something that I really like about what you described is how do you do that in a way that's repeatable and becomes embedded Because again, you know, sports taught, one of the things my coach and judo people used to say is you can practice stuff in the club, but you've got to drill it, because in the heat of a contest, or when that brown stuff hits the fan, you're going to go to default setting, you're going to go to what you know. So yeah, that's where for me that inner work, and certainly as a leader now, obviously I'm not on a judo mat now, but I guess I always think, and there's something about identity at the core of me, I'm a judo player in some of my responses. Like, for instance, that time when I said about having, you know, really, I mean, fallen apart spectacularly. I didn't do it by half, Steve, you know, and I really went. And that period was messy as anything, of burnout and depression.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff around that, around being neurodiverse and masking, doing stuff that wasn't aligned with my values, and I lost integrity unwittingly, and that I really struggled with that. But I really had a messy time. But the judo player in me, that core of me, was like, right, that has happened, and yes, some of that external stuff was really out of order and not okay. And what was it about how you were doing stuff that allowed that to impact in the way that it did? And most importantly, what do you need to do differently? And that for me was about, well, you resource yourself up. You are not in the judo terms, you either go and hit the gym, get your fitness up, do some technique training. In the career world, it was kind of about, actually, I need some inner resources. I don't need to go and do professional development of technical leadership stuff. I need to go away and do the inner development that means that I am more resourceful and I'm much more resilient. And again, you know, one of your starting questions was about how has it helped me? I'm much more internally referenced than I used to be. So in other words, I do care about what other people, there's feedback stuff that is important, but I attach less weight to it, and I'm more discerning about who is giving me that feedback, what is going on there, what in that feedback do I think is useful and helpful that I can take, even if it's a bit hard to sort of take at the time, and actually which bits do I just need to leave to one side. I don't need to take that on. So that and I think as a leader, certainly if you're a different kind of leader, which I talk about a lot, doing leadership as a quiet introvert, perhaps neurodiverse, out the box. You know, I got told once by a head, you know, you need to learn you swimming with sharks, and I was thinking, I want to be swimming with dolphins. But do you know what I mean? I'm more of a dolphin kind of swimmer, to be fair. But in order to make the difference I want to make in the world, I've got to be able to operate in different environments, and I've got to do that in a way where I stay well. So that's the massive thing for me. Yeah.
Now listen, I know that Jaffer's been listening in and has been keeping very quiet to this conversation, which must have been horrible for him.
Oh my goodness.
I just wonder, Jaff, we've got a few minutes left. Where are you? What are you up to? And how's it going?
I'm still here, Steve. I almost feel like we're beaming in from like different radio stations and different. So you both know I've been listening with absolute delight about your journey in particular, Sarah, and just the conversation and we've talked a lot about different roles over the so you know, Steve as a trainer, but also a teacher within pupil referral unit, yourself in your different roles. So I don't know if any of you know this about me, but I've always wanted to be a newscaster. I've wanted to be a load of stuff. Growing up, it was almost as though anything that I saw, any profession that I saw, I said, I wanted to be that. So whether it be a wrestler or a weatherman, because I saw Fred the Weatherman jumping around his map. If you remember Fred the Weatherman.
I used to
love, and he used to have those little sticky things that he'd stick on the map, and I'd be like, oh, that'd be newscaster. So I feel as though through the delight of NLP, I'm being able to live all of these dreams and much more. How awesome is that? How fabulous is that? Right. So I get to pretend to be a newscaster as well now, just because of the very nature of how we're doing this call. But no, it's been an absolute delight to listen, and I've just dropped Steve a message saying I didn't want to interrupt, really. I just thought, actually, this is flowing really nice. And Steve, I'm going to hold you personally responsible for what's happened this evening, and the tech gods going against me, because I think it's you bad-mouthing my Christmas jumper, and so people didn't get a proper chance to see it.
I know, oh, Jaff. Do you know what I thought? I thought some magical Christmas stuff was going on because you talked about wanting to be chief elf, and then
I've gone
you
away and
froze,
started doing it.
And then, well, I didn't know where. I thought you'd been
And you see, it was interesting because you were both talking about where we put meaning, right? So that's where I put meaning. And for those listening in, look where Sarah put meaning. How beautiful is that, right? Because I'd rather go with, now that I've had Sarah's meaning, I'd rather go with that. So Steve, you're off the hook, mate. Thanks to Sarah, because
Gee,
so
thanks.
that's what I was.
I wasn't going to worry about it too much. I've got to be honest with you, Jaff. But there you go.
Oh, but it's been an absolute delight, and we have had Tony, bless him, commenting in. So yeah, so Tony said, well, first of all, he said, love David Sedaris. Have I said that right? Sedaris?
Yeah.
So I think it was just as I was freezing that you were mentioning that book, Steve. So absolutely, I'll look into that. And then Tony also said, great journey, Sarah. Yes, if it works for you, it's likely to work for others. NLP has a way of weaving itself into the fabric of our lives. And I think for me, you two have been so instrumental in my journey. So when I think about my NLP journey, well, Sarah, we met on the master practitioner with Catherine as well.
We did.
And wow, what a program that was in terms of just being life transformational in more ways than one. And you both being there. And it was interesting, that whole thing about state management. So I know that there was a point, Sarah, that you made about sometimes you can give your own head a wobble. And sometimes there is that thing about sometimes you need someone else to just say, whoa, is that really what's going on? And I think that's what you two and others within our NLP family that you mentioned, Steve, because I do like that metaphor. I've often provided to me to just go, whoa, is that really happening? You know, is what else could that mean? And you know, what are you doing to yourself? And is that helpful? And all that kind of stuff. And it's been around a range of issues. So yeah, our journeys have been quite interesting over the last few years, our overlapping of journeys. And Tony's right, it has a habit of weaving itself into the fabric of our lives, you know, thankfully. So thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good
yeah.
stuff.
And then Tony just ended up here by saying, I'd better use those P's on Brexit. So just remind us again of the 3 P's.
Quite right, Tony, quite right.
Steve, so it was is it personal?
So is it personal? The situation, is it personal? Is it permanent? And is it pervasive?
Well, let's blooming hope Brexit isn't permanent, eh, ladies and gents? Let's, yeah, there'd be something good about that. And finally, there was one last comment here from Tony saying, lovely conversation, intimate, inspiring, revealing. Thank you. So thank you, Tony, and thank everyone else who has been tuning in. It's been a wonderful delight, hasn't it, Steve? The last 15 episodes.
Lovely.
We just thought we'd do something to help people out in the midst of a lockdown and a pandemic, and actually it's turned into something really special and really incredible. So yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Do you want to finish with a joke?
Oh, go for it, Steve. Go for it, please.
So, what is the name of Father Christmas's wife?
I don't know. What is the name of Father Christmas's wife?
Merry Christmas.
These are cracking cracker jokes.
And ladies and gents, on that note, we'll leave you to it. We hope you have a wonderful Christmas break and a fab start to 2021. And me and Steve will see you in the second week of January. Somewhere. We'll see you somewhere on the internet. We'll be there. So enjoy. Have a lovely, lovely break. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
you. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Tony, and everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.